This is Hannibal here from thehannibaltv.com with my weekly review of the points I find interesting in Dave Meltzer's Wrestling Observer newsletter. I will jump right into it. He had a bit more to say about Crown Jewel, which took place a couple Saturdays ago. Apparently, Stephanie McMahon and Paul Levesque were kissing the butt of the guy that ordered the dismemberment of a Washington Post reporter. Um, but Meltzer mentions, this is all part of the Saudi Arabia's deal to kind of clean their image, to have the WWE come in and talk about how great everyone is there and so forth. Even though apparently Sami Zayn and MVP couldn't even go there or they'd risk death, since MVP renounced his Muslim religion and Sami Zayn is Syrian. So they still have some pretty strict stuff there. I think if you're gay, they'll also kill you. Apparently, Dave Meltzer actually liked Logan Paul's performance and thinks he could be a good champion if he ever wanted to do wrestling more than here and there. It's funny. He did say that his promo skills were good, but not quite up to like championship level or whatever. But I will say that the press conference thing, when they had Logan and Jake Paul doing the Crown Jewel press conference, that was one of the most entertaining back and forths I'd seen in WWE in a long time. The in-ring boring promos of Roman Reigns' group every week are just so terrible. So you could tell that the Crown Jewel press conference may have been off the cuff a little bit and less written. So what else did he have to say about that? Apparently, Google searches for Crown Jewel were 300,000, and 200,000 of those were related to Logan Paul. So he definitely gave the show a boost. Don't know how much they're paying him. Must be a hell of a lot, though, I would imagine. But apparently, as far as people buying the pay-per-view, only 6,500 people bought the pay-per-view, which is the lowest amount of pay-per-view buys in history. But that also, you have to take into account that a lot of the WWE fans have Peacock and they're not buying pay-per-views anymore. But it's interesting because on Kevin Sullivan's podcast this week, where they talk about Halloween Havoc 2000, which Vince Russo was booking. I don't think I've ever seen it, but in that podcast, they mentioned that it had 70,000 buys. So keep in mind, Impact, their Bound for Glory pay-per-view had just a little over 1,000 pay-per-view buys. Where if you look at WCW Halloween Havoc 2000, which would have been one of the low points in WCW's history, they still had 70,000 pay-per-view buys. So it goes to show you that even at its lowest point, WCW is still a lot more popular than a lot of the stuff that's out there today. But apparently, Drew Gallic was one of the ones training Logan Paul. He was the one sent to Puerto Rico to train him there. Shawn Michaels coached him at the Performance Center. And when I did watch the Logan Paul interview with Shawn Michaels, it was Logan Paul had said that Hurricane Helms was his trainer. So it was interesting that Logan Paul actually never mentioned Drew Gallic or Gulak, whatever the hell his name is. I'm not really that familiar with him. Logan didn't mention him at all. The Raw 30th anniversary show is going to be from the Wells Fargo Center in Philadelphia. Apparently, Ric Flair put out a tweet against John Bradshaw Layfield in WWE saying, quote, "I guess the anti-bullying program you so heavily endorsed does not apply to Bradshaw," end quote. I actually like Bradshaw, especially since he's credited me a bunch of times where most people never credit me when they reference something from one of my interviews. And I think he's funny, but there's no doubt he was bullying. And he was used to weed out a lot of people in WWE. But yeah, it is funny that you hear all these bullying stories from WWE. And when I was in Deep South Wrestling, the reason I didn't last long was because I wasn't getting paid to be there. I was paying to be there, and the contract guys were all bullying the non-contract guys. And at some point, it's like, I'm going to fight one of you guys, and I'm not under contract, and ruin my chances if I don't leave. So there's always been lots of bullying in WWE. I don't know how it is now, but making people wear pink shirts, I don't know how that's ever supposed to stop bullying. Let's all wear pink shirts and put an end to bullying. Yeah. No, there's always going to be bullies, but yeah, it seemed like Bradshaw was a well-known bully in WWE, and for whatever reason, they actually liked it because it didn't seem like he ever got punished for any of his antics, other than maybe the Mauro Ranallo stuff, which was a big thing, and I guess Joey Styles, according to reports, knocked Bradshaw out at one point. Natalya suffered a dislocated nose and needed surgery on November 7th. Apparently, he's going to be out a minimum of 3 months. And I was thinking about it the other day because Ted was talking about the last dungeon class in Ted Hart's recent interview on the Great North Wrestling podcast on this channel. And it was funny because I noticed he didn't even mention Natalya, who is by far the most successful of the last dungeon class, which did include Ted, Harry Smith, Vic Richter, I forget what the hell his name was in WWE because I'd stopped watching by then. But he had a run in WWE. Jack Evans, although he was already trained, he would attend classes down there. And as I said, if you wanted to count Jinder Mahal and Gamison Jr., who's an Impact, they were in Stampede Wrestling at that time, but not really going to the dungeon classes. But like everybody thought that it would be Ted and Harry that would be the most successful, but Natty is by far the most successful. And I ended up being a reporter, so I was the most successful reporter out of that dungeon class. So, but yeah, no, without question, if you look at Johnny Devine was around too, who had some Impact matches and some WWE matches, but like by far, Natty's made and TJ Wilson, Natty's husband, but Natty eclipsed everybody and has made millions in wrestling and set records. So it's funny, no one ever would have thought it would be her. It was always going to be Ted or Harry, but for whatever reason, despite Harry and TJ winning the WWE Tag Team titles a couple times, they never really got pushed. And Harry was, during his last WWE run, they paid him 7 months to have one dark match, which I guess might be the highest paid dark match of all time. But I won't digress anymore. But I was just thinking about that the other day. She's by far the most successful of the last dungeon class. But speaking also of the last dungeon class, Peacock announced its documentary on Ted Hart called Dangerous Breed, Crime, Cons, and Cats will debut on November 22nd. And apparently the original concept was going to be following them around, recording them for a reality show, which they recorded most of this stuff 10 years ago. But then the guy that was recording it for all this, according to Dave Meltzer, unearthed some disturbing and scary stuff. And I guess he's got footage of his ex-girlfriend, Samantha Fiddler, who went missing. Apparently is still missing. Apparently there's some dramatic confrontations with Hart and various women in this documentary. And apparently Ted initially was encouraging people to be part of it, thinking that this was going to be a good thing. But Dave Meltzer thinks that this documentary is actually going to be horrible for him. And he also brings up that Ted seems to be pushing to get back in MLW, and he doesn't think this documentary is going to help him get back in MLW. But the way I look at it, I think Ted did 2 Great North Wrestling podcast episodes in October. The first one was his first interview in years. They were done with Jack Kilby, by the way, who has a Great North Wrestling podcast Sunday night. Jessica Black, who recently appeared in AEW, is appearing this Sunday at 8. But the first one was his first shoot interview in a while. It didn't do great, but it didn't do bad for that podcast. But the second one didn't even get 1,000 hits. So it just means that Ted's been off the radar a very long time. And people either don't remember him or they just don't care anymore. So at least with this controversial documentary that's being put out in association with WWE, it's going to get his name out there, good or bad. It's better than people not knowing who he is if he's trying to get bookings, because probably he'll get more independent bookings out of it. I don't know anything about this whole Samantha Fiddler stuff. I guess when I watch the documentary, it'll be the first I find out about it, really, other than the rumor and innuendo I've heard from various wrestlers. But yeah, it's going to put him back on the map at least and cause a buzz. But will it help him get an AEW with how strict they are with their hiring policies? I don't think not. And WWE, they're so corporate. I doubt they would ever touch Ted again. MLW, they seem to be grasping at straws lately for any publicity. So who knows? I think they're only running once every 3 or 4 months now. I'm not positive. I don't think they have any TV in the US right now either. So it's not like MLW is as popular as it was when Ted was in it before and held the championship for them. In fact, Ross and Marshall Von Erich recently did an interview with John Paz that I put on this channel, and they indicated that MLW wasn't using them even though they're under contract. And they seem to indicate they're not going to re-sign with MLW, which I don't blame them for, because when that Iron Claw movie comes out, that apparently now MJF is going to play Lance Von Erich in. This is like a Hollywood movie about the Von Erichs. I mean, their popularity is going to grow, and if they were in WWE or AEW already, Ross and Marshall Von Erich would be household names. They're wasting their time in MLW. And it seems like MLW, Harry Smith had this issue with them before. You can be under contract with them, and from what I understand, not necessarily get paid. You have to sign with them, but you're only paid when you wrestle. So that doesn't seem like a great contract. I actually heard that some women wrestler named Lady Frost was under that type of contract with Impact, where she had to commit to them, but you're only paid by appearance. And I guess she had asked her release in like June because they weren't using her, and they finally gave her release this week. So there's some companies out there that hold you to ridiculous contracts. You can sign with us. If you sign with us, you can't wrestle for anyone else, but we're not necessarily going to use you. So if we stop using you and suddenly AEW or WWE wants you, as long as it's still within the contract time, we're not going to let you out of the contract. So it just seems like crappy deals. I don't know why people sign those type of contracts. As far as the ratings go, Dynamite did a 0.32 rating from Boston. The show had 3,400 paid fans. NXT did a 0.15 rating. Rampage, featuring Mike Tyson from Atlantic City, only did 2,600 paid, which you would think Mike Tyson on a show alone would draw a lot more than that. But you got Orange Cassidy against a Japanese guy that your average American fan has never heard of in the main event. As great as a match that is for Smart Marks, it doesn't really appeal to anyone other than Smart Marks. SmackDown was a taped SmackDown from St. Louis because they were already in Saudi Arabia for Crown Jewel. It did a 0.48 rating. Raw did a 0.43 rating. Apparently, it was the lowest Raw crowd of the year, I believe, under 5,000, but they didn't actually report the final number, but the pre-sale was just over 4,000. Young Rock did a 0.26 rating. Impact did a 0.01 rating. And apparently New Japan after Impact did not actually have a rating, but apparently around 1,000 people watched it on Access. Women of Wrestling did a 0.06 rating. So 6 times as many people that watch Impact watch Women of Wrestling. And even though only 1,000 people watch New Japan, there's pretty much nothing in the Wrestling Observer about Women of Wrestling, even though it got a 0.06 rating and a ton on New Japan. But I guess people that read the Wrestling Observer like New Japan, most of them. I find it boring as hell, as apparently most Americans do as well, if only 1,000 people are watching the TV show. AEW, apparently they're now filming a reality show. They started November 2nd behind the scenes in Baltimore. The Young Bucks and Kenny Omega have been behind the scenes at the AEW tapings. And Meltzer speculates this might be because they're part of this reality show, since they're at the tapings but not actually appearing on camera. Nick Aldis was suspended by the NWA and taken off a show because he gave his notice and put out a video basically saying the company was an embarrassment. He later took the video down. Billy Corgan put out a statement saying he was still going to pay all this for the rest of his contract, which lucky him. In a real job, you'd never get that if you disparage. First of all, I don't know how much he actually has to work for NWA for whatever his contract is, because they don't really run that many shows. So it seems like a pretty easy job. They pushed him more than they pushed anybody. And they even gave his wife, Mickie James, a pay-per-view, an all-women's pay-per-view centered around her, which Aldis said that one of the reasons apparently why he's having issues with the NWA is because they never did a second women's pay-per-view. But the truth of the matter is, think about the numbers. Corgan's paying all these guys. Their YouTube channel does not get very many hits, okay? Mine does about 4 times as many views in a month as NWA. So how could Billy Corgan, let's say off of YouTube revenue, afford to pay a whole roster of NWA people? He's fronting this with his own money. Think about this: if Impact Bound for Glory is only getting around 1,000, maximum 1,500 hits for their pay-per-view show, and Impact is better known than NWA and is actually on TV. And keep in mind, like, pay-per-view networks take a percentage of that, and then you have to advertise the pay-per-view. Like, for instance, Impact had bought supposedly ads during Raw for Bound for Glory, which would have cost a lot of money. So it's like he can't be making enough doing pay-per-views once in a while and collecting YouTube revenue to pay people contracts and rental of studios and so forth, to run events, insurance, and like the people to record the shows. He's just doing this for fun. So I don't blame him for not wanting to do another women's pay-per-view, because probably the first one didn't make money if he's not doing a second one. So why do a second one if your first one didn't make money? Because if his first one did make money, of course he would do a second one. So you're going to waste more money and go more into the red just to please a guy that's been flat. Like, the last really big news Aldis had was when he wrestled Cody Rhodes years and years ago now. Happy Friday to you, Michael Wade, too. Doug Masters. Hello. Stephen Locke, still loving the show. Young Macho Man, any Great Khali stories? Not really, because he didn't speak English that well during the time I knew him. Either that or he was just quiet. But he was nice. And when he would work out in the gym, everyone would watch him. He would work out. This was what, like, he was in and out of Deep South a bit during the time I was training there. People didn't like to train with him because his moves were very stiff. I remember, I think it was Luke Gallows. At one point, he had his ribs taped up, and I believe that was from taking something from the Great Khali. And then I believe he actually, at that point in time, he didn't have a prescription for somas or something. And like, due to that rib injury that was from the Great Khali, he was taking some sort of pain medication to still be able to train. And he ended up getting a wellness violation for that and was suspended during the time I was there. And I liked him. He was very nice. And I think I got heat because when they announced they suspended him, I was one of the people that gave him a hug because he was nice enough to drive me around a few times, and I'm glad that he's done well for himself. But yeah, the Great Khali was nice, but he was not. Actually, I was actually at the Phoenix taping. I wrestled for WWE. They used me as an extra in Phoenix, Vegas, and Bakersfield in 2006. And I remember in Phoenix, the Undertaker was going to wrestle the Great Khali. And as an extra, you had to hang around the ring. And I do remember the Undertaker, I believe, talking to Johnny Ace. And he was not looking forward to that match against Great Khali that night. I remember him being kind of like in a bad mood that he was going to have that match. And I forget what the hell match it was, but he definitely wrestled the Great Khali on that. That stood out to me because of course I'm going to eavesdrop. As I think he was on the side of the ring talking to one of the agents in the chairs while we had to stand around the ring in case anyone wanted to practice anything on us. Thoughts of Stone Cold wanting to come back in next year's WrestleMania? Well, they pay him a lot of money. He seemed to be the highlight of the last WrestleMania, so why not? Young Macho Man, one of the greatest females of all time, Natty, she says. Ivan Santos says there's a movie about old school Puerto Rican wrestling coming out. People like the Mantar shoot interview. There were some people that said he's bitter towards the click, but it's well documented. And Shawn Michaels even said in his recent Logan Paul interview that he wasn't a nice person in those days, and he didn't treat people nicely. So I don't think he was necessarily bitter. I liked some people saying that William Regal could kick his ass when he was like a college wrestler that was actually won championships. While Regal like knows about shooting, and I'm sure he knows the Groffit and a bunch of shoot holds. I don't know if he's ever won any shooting competitions. It's one thing to put shoot holds on people that don't know any shoot holds, but if you know how to shoot, it's a little harder to put moves on people like that. Plus, Mantar outweighs him by like 150 pounds. But I'm not saying I've got nothing against Regal. All I said in that part is it seemed like being willing to kiss Vince McMahon's bare ass kept him around a while. Like, I think Vince actually likes people that kiss ass, hence why he came up with that whole segment. And I have heard he is an ass kisser from numerous people, which is one of the reasons you have to be in wrestling. And somebody said they'd rather kiss ass than wear a bullhead. I don't know. I'd rather wear a bullhead to the ring than kiss another man's ass. But I do think, honestly, if Mantar, as you said in that interview, he only wore the bullhead 5 times. He didn't like it. I think if he'd actually kept the bullhead longer, it may have increased his push and increased his popularity, because people don't even remember him without the bullhead. Everyone still thinks of him with the bullhead. So who knows? If he did complain about it and stuff too, I do know that WWE, if they find someone that doesn't like a gimmick that they necessarily think is good, they're not going to keep pushing that guy. I don't know what their plans were. I mean, Jim Cornette managed him. It wouldn't surprise me if Jim Cornette had a lot to do with that gimmick, because he was around during the Pug and TL Hopper and the Goon and all that crap before Russo took over the booking. A couple more questions here. Who is the next person I'm going to do an interview with? I am not sure yet. I'm going to contact some people this weekend. Am I going to sell other items on eBay? Yes. I just have to go back down into my storage locker, which I am trying to clean out. And somebody actually made a rude comment earlier, because I posted like a letter to my great grandparents, I guess, because it's Remembrance Day here in Canada. We're supposed to remember the veterans. And my dad was in the military. I was even in the military and the reserves for 2 years in the infantry, which I did not enjoy. But it was like a letter from the government or from the military saying that he was in prison because he was captured at Dieppe and imprisoned by the Germans, where he went through a whole bunch of torture and was mentally fucked up for the rest of his life through that. My other grandfather was in the Air Force and was never captured. But someone was like, "Oh, are you selling that too?" It's like, no, I don't actually sell stuff I care about. Cards that have been in my storage for 15 years or boots that I'm not going to use anymore, I don't give a fuck about. But important stuff, I don't sell. There's no more. I think there's still restrictions to get into Canada. you can't come to Canada, I don't think, if you're not vaccinated, but you can leave. I just have no reason to leave. You don't need to travel to do interviews anymore, so why spend the money to do that? I also have a job here in Canada that I do, um, that I actually enjoy. Cryin, who are some of the meanest people that I've encountered in the wrestling business? I don't really want to get into negativity, but I know Johnny Ace's job was to be an asshole, but just thinking back to those WWE extra things and stuff, he was always very like a real dick. Um, but I understand why you have to be a dick in that type of job. But I remember him being a real asshole. Carlos Colon for not paying people in Puerto Rico and fucking making them starve. John, thank you, checking in from Wichita. I had fun there, but I had an affair with my wife there that led to the end of my marriage. So I probably will never go back to Wichita um, for that reason. Good afternoon, Jason. Yes, that's the wrestler Doug Masters. Dale, do I think during the Attitude Era, Divas went too far with their raunchy storyline? No, because it got ratings. It got ratings, and people remember those women, and they paved the way for so many women to have jobs now. Lewis has seen Ric Flair in car commercials. Vincent, I never actually met Bill Irwin. He was an asshole for sure. He was a real asshole, but since I only had to deal with him that one time, he never really sticks out of my mind as someone that was a total asshole. Like, whereas Johnny Ace, I think I was used as an extra like 14 times before I was hired. So I had encounters with him a bunch of times where he was always rude and a dick. That's why actually when I saw the Rock's movie about Paige where Vince Vaughn played the asshole agent, they really are assholes like that, or they were during my time. It might be different. I think it's way different now. It's way easier to get a contract now too because they send people to these tryouts at the performance center that are fully paid and so forth, which I think like after FCW and when they started the actual NXT thing, that's when things got more easier for people breaking in. Dale, what do I think about people's obsession with seeing videos like apparent Owen Hart's death and human cruelty? People like that. People like videos of animals killing each other and so forth as well. I don't like that type of stuff. Actually, I was just watching the interview with Ken Shamrock that was posted on here earlier today that John Paz did, where he's doing this bare knuckle company where you're not allowed to clinch, and it's a very small fighting area, and like the rules are such that you almost constantly have to be throwing punches. And I don't even think honestly that those type of fighting should be legalized because it's just gonna fuck people up and they hardly make any pay for it. As cool as it is for fans to watch that type of stuff, like there was a reason why commissions used to be stricter, but now I think they care more about money than fighters' health. Um, because even talking to the woman fighter Crystal Bear Lawson a couple weeks ago, who has been in some bare knuckle fights and watched a bunch of them, Like you're getting your eyelid actually cut open and like cut through in a lot of these bare knuckle fights. And it's like they're not getting paid enough to be in these situations where they can't even move around properly and not even be able to clench. I don't know. I understand why he thinks that would get popular and stuff and make money, but like for the fighters' health and stuff, I don't know. I couldn't really get enjoyment of that just knowing that the fighters aren't paid much, because you're literally destroying your brain for nothing. Anyways, hope everyone has a great weekend.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it and click the subscribe button to not